Welcome to Game Data. We just got done filming the Switch OLED review, and there was another topic I wanted to talk about, but couldn't quite fit into the other script. How the various Switch models fit into the modern handheld market. Now, obviously, Nintendo's handhelds have outlived the various devices from other major players in the past. But the announcement of the Steam Deck a couple months ago got folks talking for the first time in a while about ways in which the Switch could be dethroned from its current standing as the best affordable handheld around. While reviewing the Switch OLED, I couldn't help escape thinking about this great-looking device might compare to handheld options years from now. And I see a lot of potential for Nintendo to lose a bit of luster. But without getting ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the Steam Deck for a bit. Essentially, it's a miniature laptop fit into a case with built-in controls. Kinda like the Switch Lite, but more premium. Until regular consumers start getting their hands on the device, we can only really speculate about performance, but early previews seem promising. Plus, if the controller is even half as good as their previous Steam controller, there's plenty of reason to get excited. On paper, the hardware specs also seem fairly capable, aiming to play AAA games from 2021 at a minimum of 720p, 60 frames per second. Handheld PCs like the Steam Deck have existed for years. The GPD Win Max and Aya Neo in particular have made pretty big names for themselves among tech enthusiasts as capable quality handhelds. However, those computers tend to come with a hefty $1,000 plus price tag, whereas the Steam Deck targets an aggressive price tag of $400 for its base model, about $50 more than the Switch OLED for a ton more computing power. If the Steam Deck reviews well, it'll likely be an overall better value than the Switch in most cases, specifically whenever folks don't want to play Nintendo's own games. You see, handheld PC owners can play many of Nintendo's games today through emulation. Emulation isn't perfect though, and Switch emulation likely won't be as straightforward or convenient for most people as inserting a cartridge into a Switch and booting up the game until well after Nintendo's next console arrives. With that in mind, even a super successful Steam Deck likely won't stop fans of Nintendo games from buying games like Breath of the Wild 2 on their Switch, or buying another console in the future. But it might siphon non-Nintendo game sales. After all, why would I spend $60 on a third-party Switch game when a version purchased through Steam will likely run better and potentially cost less than on my Steam Deck? Even if that doesn't seem problematic for Nintendo at first, lack of third-party support on the Wii U was a large contributor to that console's lack of popularity. If those most willing to spend money on third-party games feel more empowered to buy games on a separate platform, while still being able to retain the portability benefits that attract people to the Switch, it could provide less incentive for game developers to port their games to the Switch in the first place. We're already seeing some of this come to light right now. Various third-party developers are only bringing their games to the Switch as cloud versions, instead of porting their games directly. This is happening because the developers want to capitalize on the Switch's massive player base, but can't justify the cost, time, and labor needed to make the Switch port, if a port is even possible in the first place. As much as I'm personally not a fan of these cloud versions, they do offer some players a method to play certain games they otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to play. However, if the market shifts and fewer people see a benefit to buy third-party games on the Switch in general, there's the possibility that even the less resource-intensive cloud versions might dry up. If that happens, many of the newer, bigger budget games coming across PC, Xbox, and PlayStation may simply never be playable for anyone who only owns a Switch. In those cases, Switch owners with extra funds may find themselves pulled toward other platforms, even only to play a single game that they really want to play. When this positive feedback loop starts, less people buying games on a platform resulting in fewer games being produced for the platform, resulting in people having fewer games to play on that platform, it can be fairly disastrous to the longevity of the platform overall. It's hard to imagine the sort of loop dooming something as already well established as the Switch, but each Nintendo console varies wildly in its level of success. Anything set into motion now could have a much larger impact on whatever comes after the Switch in a few years. Now, it's not all dire straits for the Switch. Switches start at half the price of the base 64GB Steam Deck, and that $200 price difference could be massive on the lower end of the market. Some folks might be hard-pressed to ever spend $400 on a gaming console. And parents looking to buy games for their kids might have an easier time justifying the $200 price tag of the Switch Lite than the $400 of a mini laptop they might have difficulty setting up. Thus far, the Steam Deck does seem geared toward mainly enthusiasts and already established PC gaming fans. If that holds true in practice, the actual dent to Nintendo could be greatly diminished. It's also notable that consoles have surprisingly long periods of support. If the Switch is halfway through its life, most Switch games created by 2025 will run okay on the device that launched back in 2017, while the Steam Deck will likely be able to play some 2029 games well. PC hardware tends to age faster overall than consoles, due to the consoles being heavily optimized to play specific games. There's a good chance that AAA games won't run as smoothly, if at all, on this original Steam Deck by the end of the decade. Steam Deck owners will likely need to upgrade to a new device in a couple of years to stay relevant, if that device even exists. And all of this is if it isn't made irrelevant by the advent of cloud gaming and progress of smartphones in the coming years. Now, to close this out, I'm really looking forward to handheld gaming becoming even more accessible in the near future. As underpowered as the Switch is, for the most part, it's still a remarkably capable device. And I'm excited to see how the Steam Deck's competition will influence future revisions. Now, I did put in my Steam Deck pre-order a while ago, and it'll be a while, but whenever I actually have my hands on one, I'll be sure to create a follow-up video to this one to discuss how it ends up comparing to other options on the market, including the Switch. Now, until then, what are y'all's thoughts on the Steam Deck, or handheld PCs in general? Also, are you a fan of these more analytic videos? Let me know down in the comments. And if you like this video, make sure to give it a nice big thumbs up. It's still very early days for this channel, and I'd love to know the kind of content y'all are most interested in seeing. Of course, to see that content, make sure to get subscribed. I'm currently releasing new videos every 2 weeks. Until next time, catch you later.